Hello there, it's Friday the 30th of June 2017. This webinar is being recorded. This is Alan Cowie here in the New Anglia Growth Hub. We provide free and impartial support for businesses in Norfolk and Suffolk. It's a free service from government. We're here to help you, to give you guidance, information and signposting to sources of help. We can help you to understand what grants are available as well to enable your business to grow. So if you'd like an appointment with one of our Growth Hub advisors, get in touch on 0300 333 6536, or you can email growthhub@newanglia.co.uk and I'll give the details out a bit later on as well. So we've been running a series of webinars in association with Barclays, because we know that you're busy and you may not have time necessarily to get to events. So we're bringing the events to your home or office. Onto the housekeeping: if you want to participate, you can. You're looking out for the little yellow hand. That's the raise your hand button. Hit that, and then that tells us you want to come on and ask a question. Or if you don't want to do that, you can type it into the chat box instead. There's a handout available. It's a PDF. It's 12 steps to GDPR from the Information Commissioner, and so you should be able to see that PDF. Just drag it into your documents folder or your desktop or wherever you want to store it on your computer. So today's webinar is called How to Comply with the New Rules on Data Protection, and I must confess I actually didn't know anything about this subject until I met today's guest, and today's guest is David Higgins. David has spent 12 years working for various UK government agencies, including the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, HMRC, and others as well across the world, before returning to East Anglia some years ago, and he now operates a cyber security services company offering his services to local and national businesses. Hello, David. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Excellent. David, now I am reminded of a sketch by Michael McIntyre, and he's talking about marketing emails and how much he hates them. And he says something to words to the effect of, you know, when you're faced with the box and you're not sure, should the tick be there or not? And he says that usually next to the box, the statement says something like, "Do not untick this box if you would not like to stop receiving marketing emails." Is that, do I tick the box or do I not tick the box? And I guess that's sort of what we're talking about today, isn't it? You know, consent, I know is something you're going to cover later on in terms of, you know, do you want your data to be shared? And businesses have to think very carefully about how they collect data.
Sure.
So we're just going to quickly launch a poll to get going. So here we go. Right, with under a year to go until the new changes, consider your awareness of general data protection regulation. So just select one of these. It's the first time you've heard of it. You're here because you want to find out some more information. You've heard of it, vaguely aware of it, but you know, need to know more to understand what your actions are, or that you're well aware and you're already preparing, you know, putting in place some policies and procedures, or you're well aware and your company's pretty much there. You're ready or you're nearly ready. So vote for one of those now. We've got 84% of the votes in, so just give you another few more seconds. So first time you've heard of it, vaguely aware, aware but and starting to prepare, or well aware and nearly ready. So we'll stop that because we've got 91% of the votes in. Right, okay, so that's interesting. We've got 28% first time they've heard of it, about half saying that they were vaguely aware, 17% you know, aware and making preparations, and 7%, so less than 1 in 10, you know, well aware and pretty much ready. So I think most people leaning towards that, you know, early stage awareness and need to know more to understand what the next steps are. So thanks very much for participating in that poll. Okay, so David, over to you. Talk us through GDPR, if you will, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. Morning, everybody. As Alan said, I run a cybersecurity company in Norfolk, and I'm part of an international steering group trying to collate information about GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation. And if you look at the screen on the top right-hand corner, you'll see a logo for a company. It's ISC Squared, big American company, which I'm doing some work on this for. So I'm sort of using the slides that we've put together ourselves. So without too much further ado, 327 days to go before this actually starts to impact your businesses. Just try and cover off some little legal bits to start with. Currently we're running on a UK Data Protection Act. That'll soon get replaced as of May the 25th with this EU GDPR coming into force. And what this is designed to do is designed to basically extend people's protection of people's personal information. It's looking after people's data, personal information, rather than helping companies. And to comply with the GDPR, we have to change some of the ways we've been storing data, looking after people's data. It relates to, the GDPR, relates to electronic data as well as paper filed data. And UK Information Commissioner is going to be the data protection authority for the UK. It's also a fantastic resource site. They're doing their utmost to make this simplistic for everybody and to be really helpful. There's a handout, as Alan mentioned, from the ICO 12 Great Steps. The Information Commission Office producing constant updates on the GDPR. There's an awful lot of GDPR that's not quite finalized yet. You can look on the web for something called WG20. I think it's WG29, I beg your pardon, Working Group 29. It's the conglomerate of all the European governments, and they're going through various bits of GDPR which has not been agreed yet, and WG29 is a website will tell you when things are finally agreed. So GDPR, it has huge financial impact now on some of the companies, and it covers the vast area of territory. Maximum fine ever produced was for TalkTalk, and that was £400,000 by the ICO if they had been breached within GDPR. They could have been looking at 20 million euros, or 4% of your actual annual turnover. The GDPR will go across the whole of Europe now. Brexit or not, the UK has signed up for this. The Americans have got to implement it. Anybody that actually looks after any European nationals' data has to comply with this. Personal data, I just give a definition here. Okay, so personal data can be identified by name, IP address, cookie, online identifier, an address, all that sort of stuff comes under personal data. And so we have to look after that in a slightly better way than we have. And again, automated personal data, i.e. computer systems or manual filing systems. So what's new? What's the comparisons between how you've been looking after data and what comes in now? So data must be processed lawfully and fairly in a transparent manner. Transparency means you've got to show people exactly what you're doing with their data. You can't have that Michael McIntyre double take of, do I tick this box, where it says tick this box because you won't get any more of this, etc. Okay, so it has to be very specific. So if you process data through a website, or you collect data off a website, the old days of just tick this box for our agree our terms and conditions and we promise to look after your data, that's no longer any use. Transparency and explicit purposes, you have to have those explicit questions on your websites now. So if you wish for somebody to sign up for marketing purposes, you have to have a single line there saying, tick in a box and we will only use your data for this particular part of our marketing. You can't then take that data and that explicit agreement to hold their data and use it for blogging. That's not marketing. Okay, so you have to have one for blogging, one for marketing, one for something else. You have to be able to prove that you actually obtained specific permission from people as well. Okay. Adequate, relevant. You're not allowed to hold more data than you actually need for a specific job. So name and address, phone number, that's great. Email address, that's great. If you're only going to be, you may well not need an address to be held. Okay, so it's limited data minimization. You only hold the minimum amount of data you're allowed to. You actually need to do that job. Data has to be accurate and up to date. We'll see in a minute how people can check their data. It has to be accurate and up to date. You have to have steps in place where you can, a user can demand they have their data removed, or they've seen an inaccuracy on the data you're holding on them. You have to be able to amend all this data to get it to the proper states. I hope this makes more sense as we go along. And obviously process with the appropriate levels of security, which is confidentiality and integrity. Confidentiality means obviously the wrong type, only the correct people can actually have, can access this data, and integrity means that data is held in an integrity manner, i.e. it can't just be amended or deleted, amended by somebody else. So consent is very important. As I said, you have to have specific consent on specific pieces of data. You have to maintain any records of processing. So if somebody signs up to your database, you must have a record of the fact they signed up. You didn't just generate their name and address. They signed up. A user has the right to stop you processing it. They have a right to ask what information you hold on them. They have a right to ask for you to remove their data immediately. All this stuff has to happen within 30 days. And as we see further on into this webinar, you have to have an internal process that enables you to do this work. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to manage to meet the 30-day deadlines. And last point there, controller, that's you, the data controller. The data controller is the person that actually collates the data. There is a data processor, which you'll see further on, which it could be a third party actually processes the data. Okay, but you, if you're collecting people's data, you're classed as a controller. You're responsible for that data, and you're responsible for its safety, and you have to be able to demonstrate compliance. It all sounds a bit horrific, doesn't it?
David, sorry, I don't want to interrupt the flow, but can we just take just a quick question? Keith, are you on the line? Keith, did you want to just ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, sure. Is there any difference in the definition of data that is to be held under GDPR to the data that we're used to holding securely and safely under the UK Data Protection Act?
No, the GDPR is basically a personal information, personally identifiable information.
So it is the same as the data that we're used to holding anyway?
In theory, yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Keith.
Hope that makes sense, Keith.
Cool, thanks.
So, right. Carry on?
Yeah, please. Sorry, carry on.
Okay. So, individual rights. I'll let you read these. Each one of these on the screen now equates to a new process or an amended process you must have within your business. So if somebody actually emails you, wants access to the personal data, you have to be able to turn that round within 30 days. If they then email you, say, to ask you to erase that, you have to have a process in place to ensure you do that. And it's not just erasing the data off, you know, your laptop or something like that. It has to go off all your backups and any other locations to where that data may or may not be stored. Oops, sorry, press the wrong button. Last one on there is data portability. User has a right to take their medical records somewhere else or take their educational records somewhere else. The GDPR, this working group 29, should have produced by now a standard format for that data portability. It hasn't done so yet. They're still working on it. But you can see each one of these things are going to put a bit of an overhead on some businesses. The bottom line there, controller must take appropriate action without undue delay. or at least within a month of the request. So any request you have coming in, you need to be able to turn it around within a month and be able to prove you did. Because if somebody complains about you to the ICO, which is the Data Protection Authority of the UK, under GDPR, they'll ask for those records. Data protection impact assessments, something we need to look at doing, and it revolves around specific high-risk data. So it might be your medical records, your educational records, your sexuality, political leanings, anything like that. So some of these, it's just another risk assessment you have to take into account. And there's an awful lot of good information on the Information Commissioner's site on this sort of stuff as well. Okay. Consent, very important area. Everybody mentions 20 million euro fines. 20 million euro fine will come if you break the consent. I'm not saying you'll get fined 20 million, but it's the biggest fine generator possible if you break the consent. So freely given, specific, informed and unambiguous. So on your websites where you're getting people to sign up, you have to specify exactly what you're going to do with that piece of data. If it's only going to be held for a limited amount of time, you need to say it's being held for a limited amount of time. Okay. So there's no more grey tick boxes as to be open-ended holding of data. Okay. So no opt-outs, no pre-tick boxes. Data controller, again, that's you, the person collecting that data. You have to be able to demonstrate that consent was obtained. And as I say here, consent failure or breaking that consent brings the biggest fines. So some of the things you need to think about, current data you have, who's got access to the information, how current and accurate is it, could it be copied, etc. And the bottom one, any change to data records, you have to have that audit trail still. Oops. Children is one of the most difficult areas to get consent on, because often online you can't actually verify that somebody is over the age of 16. It might be 15, 14 and using their father's credit card in the same name. So it's a really, really weird and open area yet. And nobody's actually managed to prove or come up with a solution to actually help this. Again, the Working Group 29 should actually have a lot of information about this. So hence my how question mark. I apologise for the open-ended statement there, but it is a difficult one. This is where it all gets a bit weird. Personal data breaches. I'll put all these up on the screen at one go. So if you have a personal data breach, if you get hacked and somebody takes the information, you have to, within 72 hours, publicly name and shame yourself. You have to write to every single person that had their data stolen. You have to tell them the possible likely impact of that loss of data. It could be quite damaging for a company. Just turn that around 1 second and just think, if all your data is encrypted, this is a possible solution for GDPR. If all your data is encrypted and somebody still broke in and stole your data, you could, in 72 hours, stand outside your offices with your PR department and the press department and say, yeah, we did get hacked. However, it was all encrypted. There's absolutely no loss to anybody. You get a huge pat on the back from the ICO and probably a lot of new business. There'll be a lot of credibility for your business. If you imagine the damaging statements that came out of TalkTalk 2 or 3 years ago, where people didn't really know what had been stolen, whether it was encrypted or where it had gone to. So personal data breaches, it's a breach, you've been hacked, you've lost your data, this is what you have to do. And sorry, just go back to that slide 1 second. If you've lost data, on English residents, people living in this country, you would inform the ICO, they being the Data Protection Authority for the UK. If, however, during that breach you lost some records of EU citizens in Germany, you'd have to involve the Data Processing Authority in Germany, France the same, Italy the same. And so you have to, in theory, each one of the, a personal data breach kicks off a huge number of processes internally, and it must be very slick, it must be done, practiced very well. And you can imagine if you got to write or email the French authorities, German authorities, Italian authorities, and those individual people, you might not be able to do all this in English. You might have to use local languages. So it's just a thought. So data protection by design. What they're trying to do is get you to look at your systems currently, as you have now, and just run through the design of those. I'm not saying you have to tear everything up, start again, but you have to use technology here. You have to cut down access to, and there's obviously various ways you can cut down access to data, user access control being one, encryption being another. I think they're basically just trying to get you to look at your security now. And it is risk-based, obviously, as is everything in business. So at the bottom there, talking about state-of-the-art design. So, accountability, data protection impact assessments, it's just a risk assessment really. Audits of what data you have, where it is, who's got access to it, why are you holding it, do you still need it? They did a big review of some of the European data centers, and they found something like 60% was dark data. Nobody knew within the company, nobody actually knew why they still had their data. Nobody accessed it, they still had it. And suddenly this sort of thing, the GDPR, will, if you do your proper data audits, you can find a load of junk which you don't really need to have. It's clogging up a server somewhere or up in a cloud or whatever. You can probably get rid of a lot of that data. Policy reviews, internal policy documents, obviously they'll have to change to reflect the new GDPR requirements, staff training, all those sort of things. Processing activities, that's going to be a huge one to do because you have to record somehow. Every time somebody emails you to say, I want my data off. Every time somebody emails to say, what data do you have of mine, etc., etc. And obviously all the sign-ups, the consent, etc. One of the best ways to do this, if you're a reasonable sized company, is to appoint a data protection officer, a DPO. They need to be board level, have board level authority, and they are then the one point of contact for anything to do with GDPR. It's not a way of shoveling the problem to somebody else, but it is a good way of trying to coordinate all the information. So DPOs must be appointed, public authorities, and there's some caveats down to the bottom there. Large-scale processing of sensitive data. There was a thought once where a DPO had to be involved if the company had more than 250 employees. That's now been removed. There can be as little as 5-6 people in a company, but if they do large-scale processing of sensitive data, they might be a great company or such like, they need a DPO. And a DPO just makes an awful lot of sense. They don't have to be full-time people. You can employ part-time DPOs to come in and just be there. But it would be good. It puts the onus on them to actually drive all these new processes and such like. I'm doing a couple of bits of work part-time for a couple of companies in London as a DPO just on this. Okay, so DPO would liaise with everybody within the business, liaise with Information Commissioner's Office or the data protection authorities in France or Italy or whatever. International data transfers. What they're trying to do is actually have the GDPR covers the whole of Europe. Any data transfers in and out of that would actually be controlled by this GDPR. There used to be, got a note somewhere, sorry, lost my note. Sorry, can I come back to that in a minute? Just one sec. This is just a quick catch-up. So you must. Data minimization, only hold as little or a small amount of data as you actually need to get the job done. Pseudomization, split the records up so you don't have the full details. You could actually refer to somebody's bits and pieces of records by numbers as opposed to a name. Transparency, allow the individuals to monitor, and the last one there, improve security, is very important. Implement technical measures, organisational measures, train your staff, inform your staff, get staff seminars running about GDPR, explain to them what they can and can't do, change your policies within your companies. Human beings are the best things in the world for working and are also the best people in the world to help hackers. If you get your staff involved, a lot of this becomes second nature, and it's nowhere near as daunting as it may well seem. Okay, so appoint a DPO. It doesn't matter, just somebody who can get to grips with this rather than, the MD or the FD. Just somebody within the business can get to grips and do the informing of the other staff and the liaison.
David, are you all right to take a quick question?
Sure.
Okay. John, are you there? You've just typed in your questions, but do you want to ask it directly to David?
If I can turn the mic on, hang on a moment.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Very simple questions. A lot of people have information on smartphones, individuals and otherwise, and how does this relate to that? With a follow-up question of, does natural person also include a company, or is it literally just individual human beings? Thank you.
It's personally identifiable information, John, so that relates to a human being. Data you're holding on a phone, you still need to protect that data and be able to prove you've got the data on your phone for legitimate purposes.
So does that then means perhaps that I go out and do business with a person, I record their telephone number because I'm talking to them and so on, and I would need their address to find them. Are we in the scope?
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, actually. It's a good question. Can I try and figure that out and get back to you?
By all means. Thank you.
I mean, I can see your point. It's a natural...
Yeah, it follows on again. I make invoices. I need certain information to sensibly send out an invoice. Mm-hmm. Accounting rules seem to mean I need to keep invoices for a long time.
Yeah.
How does that tally in with keeping data for as short as possible within these rules?
Well, as long as you protect it, you'll be fine. If you can squirrel away your accounts electronically onto an encrypted something or other, cloud, encrypted cloud somewhere. You've still got access to it, and nobody else has. That would be a cover-all.
Okay, thanks for that. That does clarify a bit. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. David, carry on.
All right. So just to recap, and there's a few more slides to go just before everybody actually falls asleep. I'm sorry about that. These are the 12 main points that come from the ICO, and some of which I've gone through today. The first two are the most important to my mind, and the first two should be done immediately, as soon as possible. So if you're a business, you need the board support. The business units have to be on board. They have to be aware of this. They have to understand the implications and the urgency of doing this work. Without the support of the board, it doesn't matter if you're the best IT person in the world or the best manager. If you don't have the board behind you, this isn't going to work at all. So, board support. Find out all the information you have, all of it, where it is, backup tapes, is it in paper records. Until you find the extent of all that data your company holds, you can't approach GDPR. From 3 to 12, they can be done at any point in time in the future, but you have to do number 2. Number 1 and number 2. 2 is the most important. Find all the data you've got, all of it. Write it all down, not the actual information itself, but all the location stuff, who's got access to it, where it's stored, where it was backed up to. Are these backups still current? Is it on an old hard drive somewhere? Is it on a couple of laptops in the cupboard behind us, etc.? You just have to find it all. Sony got hacked ages ago, about 4 years ago. Sony didn't actually get hacked through the front door. They got hacked on a backup tape that was in Spain that they'd forgotten about. So we're producing more and more information, and we share it with so many different people. This is just what business does, and we distribute it everywhere. We send it to people. We just don't know where it's stored. This is what I'm trying to get back to. Find out where all your data is. And in the future, we're going to have to balance a business need with the data protection. Data protection means security around data. Do we have to encrypt it? Where does it go, etc. So, understand what data you have, where it is, who has access to it. Personal identifier information, health records, credit cards, trade secrets, where it's held. Is it on a database, in a file, a folder, on a virtual machine, network? Who's got access to it? Employees, contractors, third parties. Don't forget, you're the data controller in the future. You control the data. If you give it to third party to process that data, you have to ensure that that third party is still GDPR compliant. If they mess up and lose the data that you collected and you gave to them, you're liable for the fines. So all these add up to the risks, really. So just do a huge data audit. It's a huge task, but until you actually get to the bottom of where all your data is and who's got access to it, you can't address GDPR. So personal data security, behavior of personal data, how it's left lying around. As a security person, I find data all over the shop. I'm an ethical hacker. I find it very simple to find stuff. People just forget where they've left it. Oops. So I will put these up as a handout. These are definitions, all from the GDPR definitions. So running down the left-hand side there, you've got data subject, personal data, what a controller is, what a data processor is, DPO, and I will put these up in a sec. Recipient, etc., etc. Okay, so these are straight off the GDPR, and again, they'll be on the ICO website. So, security risks. Everything is a risk, and you just need to go through the personal data you have and try and assess the risk. And this Article 35 of GDPR specifies down the bottom there. It's very hard reading, GDPR. So I've just included a style of writing there. So prevention, encryption, doesn't matter if somebody steals encrypted data, provided you've looked after the encryption key properly and haven't left the encryption key alongside the encrypted data, nobody can unencrypt it. Anonymization and pseudonymization, again, where you hold data but is not identifiable as being linked to that one person. User access control, only the right people have access to that specific data. It's quite obvious the accounts data within your business is not available to everybody. It's only available to those in the accounts department. Similar marketing and sales data, you don't really want everybody having access to all that data. It has to be very, very easily controlled or gently controlled, and minimizing your data. Only hold what you need to have for that job. That was it.
Cool. David, thank you very much. Let's just go to a question from, just lost him. David, where is David? So I'm just trying to find him on my list here. David, can you hear me, David?
Hello.
Hello there. We can hear you. So do you want to ask your question straight to David?
Brilliant. Yes, please. As a health and safety team, we hold a lot of personal information through incident reports and health surveillance. Now, if the person says they don't want us to hold that data, we could be in breach of health and safety legislation. Mm-hmm. So like asbestos, we have to hold that for 40 years. How do we get around that?
That's a question, David, I would take straight to the ICO, because this GDPR is a regulation from the EU which we signed up to, but there's also different directives that come in alongside the GDPR, and certainly things like this where you have to have its historical, its health and safety governance from the UK government that then slides alongside the GDPR, and you have local rules, as it were, from the UK government, so you have to hold that. But that's one to just take straight to the ICO itself, David. I mean, without
lovely, thank you.
You know, I can certainly look it up for you on the web, but then you could probably do it just as quickly as me. But GDPR is the global bit, but every internal government has to have their own set of laws which meld in with this. You know, you can't have health and safety rules just torn up because of GDPR. That'd be ridiculous. And the sort of historic data you're having to keep will be the same with a lot of different companies that have to keep historic data.
Okay, brilliant.
Thanks. Thanks, David. Can we go to, by the way, if anybody's got a question, just there's the raise your hand button, hit that and we'll come to you. I just want to see, is Georgie, are you on the line? Did you want to come in, Georgie? That you've asked a couple of points. So just if you want to put anything to David, then please do.
I have. Oh crikey, where do I start? I suppose the last, the last one I was asking is, we use quite a bit of third-party software for mailing our clients, and so we might use MailChimp or something like that. How can we guarantee that what we're using is compliant, that we're not, by using that software, putting ourselves at risk of being...
I think you find companies like the steering group I'm sitting on, we've just been joined by Microsoft, or a person from Microsoft, because they're getting themselves GDPR compliant. Salesforce in the States, MailChimp I use. You know, they're all going to have to do this, and because you're collecting the data and giving it to them, they have to be able to come back to you and go, yeah, we are GDPR compliant. Because
you were saying I would be liable if they got hacked. Yeah. I'm liable. We're not such a big company that's an issue, but I could see that I've got to be careful about what software I use. We use an iCloud, a bit of software that's in the cloud called Airtable, which is absolutely fantastic. It's made a massive difference to what we do. But again, that data is in the cloud, and I can't guarantee that that's encrypted even. I don't know whether it can be encrypted. How can I get around that?
You can always ask the cloud supplier.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would ask them directly. Just say, how compliant are you with GDPR? Is my data, where is my data? Which particular cloud is my data held in? I'd be horrified to find it if it was in Russia or China or some.
Oh, don't. Yeah.
But it is just worth a question to those suppliers. They won't be upset. I mean, I use MailChimp all the time for my stuff.
Yep.
And
Great.
I'll make sure they're compliant, or I'll have to think of something else. But all these big companies, Salesforce is a massive CRM system, cloud-based. They're going to have to be GDPR compliant just to stay in business. Microsoft the same.
So yeah, just be careful what software you use, I guess.
And ask those questions out front.
Yeah. Okay. And could I get proof? If I have proof of those questions, does that back me up? I guess it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Email's great.
There was just one other question as well. A lot of what we do is gets involved with Facebook and competitions and things, and we work alongside a lot of other companies that run competitions to, I suppose, what could you say, people who are quite responsive, should I say, to a good competition. So in that area, some of the companies we work against, I guess, are putting up competitions and using that data for their marketing purposes. Am I right to think that they should be explicitly saying that they're going to use that data?
Yes.
They're harvesting data. They're harvesting contacts effectively by
by joining this competition to win a box of chocolates or whatever. We will hold your data, and we will be marketing using your data. We will sell it to other people. They have to be really explicit what they're going to do. And, they can't accept the data without the user then going, click, OK, I agree to all the terms, and let's just see if I want the chocolates or whatever it was.
Great. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgie. Can we go to, where's Keith? Keith. Hello, Keith. Can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Go on, have your questions then.
Yeah, sure. I've got two questions. The first is, could you talk a little bit more about how you deal with encryption practically, please, David? In other words, is it the data that you're encrypting, or is it the physical computer drive on which that data is stored that you're encrypting? And what level of disruption does that cause to the way that you access the data using software that that you use on a daily basis to do your work?
Encrypting data, I mean, I've had a background working for governments. Everything was encrypted there, even your memory sticks and your phones and all that. It makes absolutely no difference. It's always transparent to the user. They don't know it's encrypted. It's just because that user, encryption goes alongside access control. So you have a group of users that are allowed access to that data, and by giving them access, it effectively, even though the data has been scrambled and encrypted by an encryption process, the software they're using just sees it as normal text, normal data. Anybody else that picks up that data file wouldn't be able to understand it because they don't have the access stroke permission stroke decryption process to see that data.
So are you saying then, sorry, I was going to say, are you saying then that, let's say all of the data is held on a server hard drive, that when the permission to access that data resides within the way in which that data is or that drive is encrypted, so that anyone accessing it using software that is on their local workstation is just let through and they don't notice any difference?
Yes, it's seamless. It is transparent. I mean, all my laptops are encrypted. It's all government grade encryption. If somebody was to break the car window, or I had a glass of wine too many and left it on a seat of a train, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest that somebody's got my laptop. Apart from the fact I'd have to go and buy another one, which would be disconcerting, but the data on there would be totally safe.
And presumably the same applies to mobile phones that also have access, or I suppose mobile devices, laptop, as well as laptops, but phones, iPads, etc., that would have access to that data. They also need to have some form of physical encryption on the phone or iPad, etc.
Absolutely. one of the yeah, I mean, basically just try and encrypt everything. Encryption's not expensive, and it's no longer disruptive. The only thing you have to do with encryption is to have a thing called key management in place. So the encryption keys, when they're actually used to initially encrypt a hard drive, the encryption keys are kept safe somewhere else. So if somebody can actually steal the hard drive or data and steal that encryption key that was used to originally encrypt all the data, they can read the data and de-encrypt it. So basically, it's a combination of encrypted hard drives, user access control, and obviously any form of communication that people do, dialing in to their office or from home. Those links need to be encrypted, and it's not expensive. There's very simple little bits and pieces you can put on phones, on laptops. Certainly be careful of things like free Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi is totally readable by people like me. I can see what you're typing, sending. A very simple little piece of software put on your phone or your laptop can stop that happening.
Okay. Keith, did you want to just quickly come in on that second point as well about
the second point? Yeah, sure. So far, a lot of what you've been talking about has been digital data. My understanding is that the GDPR also relates to paperwork. And so to that extent, is the paperwork that we hold and many businesses hold in their office required now to be held under lock and key within the office as a physical security measure? And secondly, to the extent that we send documents in the post to a client or to a customer, would we need permission from the customer to use that as a means of communication, given that the data can easily be lost, stolen, whatever, by Royal Mail?
Yes, exactly. Again, it's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that last part at all, paper. But certainly paper records, many an office I've been into, and there's an empty room in the office is just stacked floor to ceiling with those cardboard filing cabinets, paper spilling out everywhere. The paperwork will have to be lock and key or looked after in a better manner.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you. I really don't know the answer to the postal one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That I wish I was a lawyer, I tell you.
Are there any more questions? Last final chance for questions. You've certainly worked through a fair few there. Nope, I think no more questions. So that's great. David, massive thank you for that. You've really helped to simplify what is, on the face of it, seems like quite complicated, but you've managed to just pick out the key bits, and everybody's going to be different, I guess, because for some businesses it might just be they've got to make just a couple of simple changes to stay compliant, and it shouldn't interrupt too much with their business, but it might just be that they need to make sure they get consent in the right way, and that that they're storing all the data properly. So a couple of simple changes. Other businesses, I'm sure, will have to spend more time overhauling their their data policies and so on. So it's going to be different for everybody. But no, thank you so much for that talk on GDPR. So that's it from us today, and we'll send this out later on with some other handouts. So that's all. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.